Okay, folks, we are here with Dori Prescott. She's the Director of Home Care for SeniorInc.org. How are you, Dori?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Great, thanks for joining us. Okay, what do you have for us today? I know there's a lot going on.
Well, I want to talk about our consumer-directed care model that SeniorCare has, and all state home care agencies have this. And it's really just an alternative way of delivering services rather than your traditional providing services through a contracted vendor who finds the worker and sends them into the home and has some strict guidelines on what can and can't be done in the home. So
Mhm.
the consumer-directed model is for those consumers that are deemed eligible for services, the state home care program, and people are able to hire their own worker rather than going through a contracted provider. And it allows their worker to become, to do what they really want them to do, and they aren't bound as much by the rules and regulations through a contracted provider. The consumer does become the employer, and the worker can do anything from providing personal care to helping with some homemaking to even helping with maybe changing kitty litter, which isn't allowed with our homemakers through the state home care provider. It's just one of the rules that um, is in there for from our funding EOEA is our funding source. So the worker, it's really an agreement between the worker and the consumer in terms of what they do. And if the worker or the consumer needs help with, as I said, a little pet care, maybe they need help getting a meal, maybe they need help with bathing, maybe they need to be driven places. They just work it out with a worker that they hire.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
Dory, so I think what we're talking about is the ability for the consumer to hire a family member, right? Or a neighbor who they know
Yes.
well and that they trust more in the household. Is that right?
That is correct. So it really works well if there's somebody in place that's already providing some kind of service for the consumer. It could be a family member, not spouses. Unfortunately, spouses are not eligible. But anyone else, a child, a sibling, a grandchild, a friend, a neighbor, it can really be anybody that the consumer deems eligible or deems appropriate to help them with the services. And sometimes they're already doing this, and it's a way for them to get paid for this. So it sounds like it's really cumbersome on the part of the consumer. There's a lot of paperwork to sign up front, but SeniorCare contracts with a fiscal intermediary, and so that fiscal intermediary does all the legwork in terms of payroll, tax withholding, and other tasks that must be completed for the consumer to be a legal employer. They work with the IRS to get an employer identification number, which is an important thing. They receive and process all the timesheets. The consumer or their surrogate would send those in to the fiscal intermediary to be processed, and they get them out to the worker. They prepare the worker's paychecks and can even do direct deposit. They file and pay the employer's share of the state and federal tax, including unemployment, workers' compensation, W-2 forms, all of that. So it really is very helpful on the part of the consumer or their surrogate. Sometimes a consumer isn't really able to manage the program, so it does allow for someone to do that on their behalf. That surrogate, however, cannot also be the worker. It has to be two separate people. But it works really well for people that have people doing this or know of people that could do it because it's people that they trust, it's people that are in their life, they have full control of how the program works. And given that there is a statewide worker shortage, it really helps to mitigate that problem as well.
So it's a couple of things. It's perhaps this neighbor, friend, family member is already doing this work and they can
Correct.
get paid.
Yes, that is correct.
Or the consumer is so much more comfortable having someone they know, particularly during COVID, in their household as opposed to a stranger, right?
Yes, yes, that's
And then,
correct. Yeah.
and
And
then also there's a shortage of these home
yes,
care workers, right?
yes. And sometimes they're actually paying that person. And so this is a way for them to use state home care dollars to pay for those services because we we actually pay the fiscal intermediary out of state home care dollars. We determine, how many hours are appropriate for a particular consumer, and then they bill us as the state ASAP we pay them, and then those dollars pay for the worker. So the consumer would pay the same as they would for any other home care program, whatever their assessed cost share is, which could be anywhere from 0 to 100% of the cost of the service.
Mm.
Depending on
So
what.
how do people find out about this program?
Call SeniorCare on 978-281-1750, and they could speak with our information and referral department and just say that they're interested in the consumer-directed care model. And then a care manager will go out and do an assessment and talk with them about that model and all the other services that SeniorCare has as well. And even if they're enrolled in a program and they have that consumer directed as their service option, there's other services they can receive along with that as well. It's not an either or. So once the care manager goes out and assesses them and speaks with them about what their needs and preferences are, and they're deemed eligible, then they'll work with them to figure out what their care is going to look like, how much consumer directed care they might want, along with maybe Meals on Wheels or a Lifeline or something else that may help them to remain independent in their health.